As you know, BookTube, I am a young 20-something male. So what is always on the mind of a young 20-something male? Well, obviously it's sex. So, but I'm not any kind of young 20-something male. I'm also an extremely big book nerd. So if I want to think about the topic of sex, what other way to do that than through books? So that's what this video will be about, is about a strew of books under a unifying theme that I would like to read, starting in April and probably spilling out into further months. So May, June, depends how long, because I have a lot of books on this list that I want to read, and books that look interesting. Maybe I'll pick up some other books while I'm at it along the way, but I'll show you what I have in mind for now. We'll start with the culprit book, or at least the major book that set most of this up, set my thinking in this way, got me thinking about sex, BookTube. It is The Evolution of Desire by David M. Buss, and it's Strategies of Human Mating. I've technically started it already, but David M. Buss wrote a book previous to this. Well, this is the third edition, so this predated that other book, but he wrote a book called A Murderer Next Door, or The Murderer Next Door, and that book was about the psychology of killing, why people always think about killing, and why most normal people, or people in general, largely think of killing at someone at some point in their life, but over 90% of us don't act through on those desires. And David M. Buss is an evolutionary psychologist, and he wanted to know why that is. Why does that seem to be hardwired in human reaction to certain things? And to my surprise, my little teenage mind at the time, I was surprised on how much that book was about human relationship. And it was like 80% of the book was about human relationships gone wrong, leading to thoughts of murder. And in some of the cases he studies in that book, actual acts of murder. One example that really sticks in my mind was a woman who found out that her lover was cheating on her, drove to the hotel that he was at, stayed outside waiting for him, and then as soon as he walked out of the hotel, drove him over a couple of times with her vehicle, got out of her vehicle, looked at his mangled body, and started weeping, saying how much that she still loved him. Yeah, so it's kind of strange, and you can see why that would stick in my mind. And another major thing about that book is that that book by David M. Buss is that that was one of the first forays into nonfiction, or at least into this new era of reading for me. I've read some nonfiction when I was a kid, some sports books and whatnot, but it was really that one book and a few others that really had me more exploring the nonfiction side of reading. So I have a lot to thank to David M. Buss to making me think about sex and about murder and about nonfiction in general. But this is the centerpiece book on that list. I'll be reading this right away. I just started it today, just barely, and this will be the first book. This is a guaranteed read on that list. This is the third edition. The first edition came out in the 90s, and then it was revised in, I think, the early 2000s. And then in 2016, he basically redid the whole book based on newer evidence. But he's generally considered one of the major figures in the evolutionary psychology movement in academia. And this is not the only book of his that's on this list, but we'll get into others right away. So then I have another book. The topic of sex is quite wide-ranging, so it'll crisscross with many different aspects of sex. And this one is not technically on sex, but it's there. It's Survival of the Prettiest, and then the subtitle is The Science of Beauty. And kind of sexy cover there, but when did this come out? I think this came out early 2000s as well. Yeah, 1999. And this is just a study of the study of beauty and taking an evolutionary route. this is one of the early works that try to do that. There has been other works that have come after this, fairly recent publications that do similar things to this, and those are on my lists too, but I have those as ebooks, and I'll be showing those to you presently. But this one is another one of the pioneering works, and yeah. Then we come to, well, where should I go? Let's do this one. Yeah, this one's another book on sex. This is Pornland. It's by Gail Dines, or Dines, and it's how porn has hijacked our sexuality. This is basically a feminist counterattack to pornography, which is usually seen as like a free speech issue, where it's like you can't censor pornography because it's free speech, in some sense like that, and she's fighting back against that idea, and also how pornography affects our culture. When was this book written? I think this book was written 2010, so yeah, right around where I thought it was. I was going to say 2012, 2010, and yeah, so it's a feminist perspective on porn. And then, when you're talking about sex, you can't get away from talking about sex without thinking about philosophy, of course. So then I have this book here, which doesn't have a title, but on the spine here, it's The Philosophy of Sexuality. I can't read the entire name of the author because it's not on the cover, by Don E. Marita Jr. And this is a fairly early book too, 1997. I kind of like the cover that doesn't have anything on there except for a painting, and then you got all the book title and whatnot on the back. And this is more of a scholarly work, and I think the sexuality takes a wider range than sex itself, more as sex as in sex and gender, sex and identity, and that kind of thing. And so here's a philosophy work on the work of sex. And to stick with philosophy, we enter into the domain of ebooks. And who else do you want to read about, writing about sex than Roger Scruton, of course. This is his book, Sexual Desire, and the subtitle is A Philosophical Investigation. Doesn't that sound erotic? I'm quite amused at the very, well, let me read to you the very beginning of the preface of this book. The subject of sexual desire has been largely ignored by modern philosophy, and the biographies of the great modern philosophers suggest that they have tended to avoid the experience of desire as scrupulously as they have avoided its analysis. I leave it to others to offer theories as to why this is so, but the subject requires that I make a general remark concerning the trouble that philosophy encounters when it enters this domain. Doesn't that just sound riveting? Doesn't that just turn you on, BookTube? That's the first book on my e-reader that I have on the topic of sex. We're going to go down to a book that I have already started. It's also by Roger Scruton, and it's his book on beauty. It is Beauty, A Very Short Introduction. So I usually choose a book on my e-reader for reading at lunch at work. So I have 2 breaks and a 30-minute lunch, and I always bring my e-reader because it's a book I don't actually have to hold open for break while I'm eating a snack or eating lunch. And this is the book that I've chosen. I'm on chapter 2 in this work, and it's fairly short. It's like 160 pages or something. And yeah, it's him trying to define what beauty is and the very different aspects of beauty, and whether it's the same as the true and the good, and all the kind of philosophical fodderall that you'll get from a philosopher on a subject matter that seems intuitive, but anyways, it's a short book that piques my interest. And then, let's see, where do we go next? Let's stick with philosophy here, and this is another philosophy book, and it is this book here. It's The Ethics of Hooking Up, and the subtitle is Casual Sex and Moral Philosophy on the Campus. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a philosophical investigation of consent, on the whole idea of hooking up, where what he says here, it's by James Rocha, Rocha, or Roca, however you want to pronounce that. Um, the author's exploration into hookup culture, which is usually two people who don't know each other, who don't care to know each other, and are only there for the physical interaction. And what he says, it's usually under the influence, so some kind of drug or alcohol. And he looks into the ethics of that and whether or not you can come up with a sound philosophical ethic of hooking up that isn't exploitative, which almost seems amusing to me, but I'll give him a chance, give him let him air his argument, as all philosophers want to do. Thank goodness it's a fairly short book, so I don't think I don't have to read a massive tome on the work. This next book is probably the oldest book on this list. It's from the 1970s, and it's called Sex and Dehumanization. It's by David Holbrook, and this book seems to be a contemporary or a critique of the contemporary views, in this case the 70s, on sexuality and how they dehumanize people. And as if you're aware of any of history, the 70s were a particularly raunchy time when it comes to sexual morals. So it'll be interesting to read this older take, especially since it has a preface from, I think, the late 90s, of the author going back and reconsidering his work. So it'll be interesting to read that. A lot of these books are fairly short, so it's not like I'll be stuck in a 1,000-page tome for any of these. Let's go to another. I guess this book is also taking a more of a conservative position on sex. But this one's a very recent book. I think this came out in the last few years. It's called Rethinking Sex by Christine Emba, and then the subtitle is A Provocation. So it's a author offering a contemporary scathing review of our sexual morals, and looking forward to seeing what she has to think on these issues. So that's Rethinking Sex. I think this book is a little bit longer, but maybe not. And then we go to another one of those books that takes the evolutionary route. I showed this book here, Survival of the Prettiest, and then it has The Science of Beauty, so it takes a more of a scientific view. This book here is called The Evolution of Beauty, and the subtitle is How Darwin's Forgotten Theory of Mate Choice Shapes the Animal World and Us. And then the subtitle here, or the author here, sorry, is Richard O. Prum. And this book is fascinating, or sounds interesting to me. It also helps that a Book Olive here on BookTube, she recently read this and praised this. I think this made it on her end of the year list for last year of books that she really liked. So, The Evolution of Beauty. And I think that's the last book on this list. For this e-reader, I have more books to show you, but this e-reader has certain books that have one more book to go on this e-reader here. This is more of a fun take on sex. This is a book called Lust by Simon Blackburn, and he's a philosopher, and this is a philosophical look at lust, and this is in the Seven Deadly Sins series by Oxford, where they had a writer write a short journalistic or maybe philosophical or however, basically a non-academic look at the Seven Deadly Sins, usually combined with humor, I should assume, because the covers are very cartoonish. As you can see, there's a foot or a leg suggestively tiptoeing into the scene here. And I have the physical copy of the book on Envy in this series, which I found used, and then this is the ebook of the book on lust. That's it for that e-reader. I said we would go back to David M. Buss, and so this is another book, far more recent book of his, and it's When Men Behave Badly, and then the subtitle is The Hidden Roots of Sexual Deception, Harassment, and Assault. And a lot more serious, more somber tone than the general book on mating. This is more of the manipulative side of that relationship and how men are usually at the focal point of that. So this will be a very interesting, more updated view to read, say, after I read The Evolution of Desire. So that's that book. Again, that's not the only book of his on this list. Then we get into some books that explore a bit of the history, not so much as like a direct book on the philosophy or the science or the evolutionary side or the biology of sex. This is more history. This is Unmentionable, and then the subtitle here is The Victorian Lady's Guide to Sex, Marriage, and Manners, and it says that it's quite funny. Oh, the author here is Therese O'Neill, and I did read the very short preface to this, which is very playful and funny. Kind of skewering the view of people who read or who watch or read, say, Jane Austen's books, or like watch a movie adaptation of Jane Austen's books, and they're like, "Man, I wish I could live in that era." This is her kind of dispelling that view of that romantic selective view that you see in movie and in art of the romantics. The world of chivalry and manners, and everyone dresses all nicely and elegantly and whatnot. It's also a world without healthcare, with strict male to female hierarchy, and a lot of social norms that we would consider horrible these days. So this is more of a historical view on that subject. And then we move on to more of a anthropological look on sex. This is The Dawn of the Deed, with an epic cover there. It's the subtitle here is The Prehistoric Origins of Sex, and it's by John A. Long. And yeah, it's a anthropological look, a prehistoric look at the dawn of the deed. And then we move on to another history book. This is Intimate Matters, a history of sexuality in America. So it's particularly to America, but it's a history of sex. This is the third edition, and it's by John DeMello and Estelle B. Friedman. And Intimate Matters. And then we move on to another history book. This is called Love, a History. It's by Simon May. And the table of contents seems to suggest that this is more of the history of love through philosophical thinkers, which kind of put me off it a little bit. But the description doesn't seem to claim that. It doesn't claim that. It claims it's more of a general history of love, not specifically a philosophical history of love. The reason why that concerns me is because, for example, there's whole chapters devoted to Aristotle, Plato, Spinoza, Rousseau, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Freud, and Proust. And if you know anything about Proust or Nietzsche and their thoughts on love, you don't really want their advice on love or any kind of reflection on their ideas of love, because while they're influential in their respective fields that they wrote in, love is not one of their strong suits. So that's Love, a History. And then we move on to a more contemporary book. This is called Sex at Dawn, and the subtitle is How We Mate, Why We Stray, and What It Means for Modern Relationships. And then it's by Christopher Ryan and Cacilda Jetha. Cacilda. And Jetha is the last name. Sex at Dawn. And this is a fairly contemporary book too, I believe. Usually when I consider contemporary, I'm like post-COVID, pre-COVID. Though I know for a lot of people who are older than I am, usually the debate between, or the threshold between modern or contemporary and not would be like, say, 2000, or sometimes even older than that, depending how old you are. And then we come to the last book by David M. Buss on this list here. I don't really have a title for this one, or at least the title, or the cover doesn't show the subtitle, so I'm going to show you just the cover here, or the head front page here. This is Why Women Have Sex, and it's by David M. Buss, but it's also by Cindy M. Meston. So it's a co-authored book, and for a book provocatively titled Why Women Have Sex, you kind of want a woman as a sub or a co-author on here. And then the subtitle is Understanding Sexual Motivations from Adventure to Revenge and Everything in Between. And I hope this book isn't sensationalist. That title, of course, is meant to draw people in, and usually men, I would assume, unless there's women who are ready to be infuriated to read this, but I hope this is like an actual book with substance instead of clickbait. But we'll see, because I don't, like, Why Women Have Sex, how different is it from men, really? But I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't know. Here is one of the more fascinating books on the subject. This is, that doesn't show me the cover here. The cover here is very blurry, so I have to go to the front page. Here we go. A Billion Wicked Thoughts, and is what the book is called, by Ogi Ogus, or Ogi Ogus. There's a G there, but and Saya Gadam. And the subtitle is What the World's Largest Experiment Reveals About Human Desire. And I believe that refers to a study that they did, but it's also based on the internet and the internet's influence on human sexuality, which explains. I'll show you the title here too, or the cover. This is what the cover looks like. Very suggestive. What the internet tells us about sexual relationships. But as you can tell, it's very blurry. Oh, you can read that on here. Okay. It just looks blurry to my eye. And then we come to the last book on the evolution of beauty. This is A Taste for the Beautiful by Michael J. Ryan, and then the subtitle is The Evolution of Attraction. So as you see, it's very much in that vein, but this one here looks like it focuses more on animals than on humans. But I could be wrong about that. And then we got one more book. This is The Arc of Love, and it's How Our Romantic Lives Change Over Time by Aaron Ben-Zeev, or Zeev. There's an apostrophe in their last name. So, The Arc of Love, How Our Romantic Lives Change Over Time. And I guess that is the last one. There is another book I guess I kind of could read. I don't think I will, but it's on my e-reader, and I obviously bought it with the intention of reading it at some point. It's Sex and Virtue. It's an Introduction to Sexual Ethics by John S. Grabowski, and it's a Catholic book. It's a book on Catholic thought on sex and virtue. So maybe I would read this. We'll see how the wind blows. But those are the books on sex, BookTube. I know sometimes we're crossing the threshold of taboo on BookTube here, but since I'm a young 20-something male, obviously exuding male sexuality, I figured that I might as well breach that taboo and talk about sex, and I'll report back about what these books have to offer, and if anything is worth recommending. So stay tuned, BookTube, and I hope you enjoy your reading.